Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Living Islam in America. I'm your host, Johari Abdul Malik. Last week we invited a distinguished panel to discuss Pope Benedict's famous or infamous 2006 Ratzenberg address, in which he quoted from a Byzantine emperor, Manuel II Palaeologus. In this debate he had with a learned Persian Muslim, he said, "Show me what Muhammad has brought that is new, and I will show you there things only evil, inhumane, such as the command of the spread of Islam by the sword and the faith that he preached." This was shocking to Muslims around the world and an insult. But instead of flooding the streets, the protests, burning effigies of the Pope, what emerged was a group of 138 prominent Muslim leaders from around the world, scholars, intellectuals, Sunnis and Shiites, and it was entitled "A Common Word Between Us and You," a healing discourse that focuses on the creedal and commonalities of both faiths, both Christians and Muslims, the love of one God and the love of the neighbor. Since then, there have been several unprecedented interreligious and intercultural meetings and dialogues, including one that took place at the Vatican in November of 2008. On today's program, we have continued that discussion, and we will have all that and more coming up next on Living Islam in America. The Muslim Initiative, quote, "A Common Word Between Us and You," states, "Without peace and justice between these two religious communities, there can be no meaningful peace in the world. The future of the world depends upon peace between Muslims and Christians." Continuing our discussion is Father Leo Lefebvre, Catholic priest at the Archdiocese of Chicago and professor of theology at the Georgetown University. He is a longtime participant in dialogues between Muslims, Jews, and Buddhists. Next is Chris Zippel. He is a president of the Institute for Global Engagement, a think tank with legs. I'm not going to go there tonight. Promotes sustainable environments for religious freedom worldwide. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf is the chair of the Cordoba Institute Initiative, as well as the Imam of Masjid al-Farah in New York City, and the author of several books, including What's Right with Islam. Thank you, gentlemen and brothers. We're going to pick up our conversation where we left off, and I have to ask you really the bottom line question. We talked about the maybe now we were at the grass tops. How does this kind of information get out? I know the initiative is there. Can you tell me about how does the initiative function to get this common word out? I know you're on the show, I know you've been involved, but how do we get it out to everyday believers?
Well, we'd have to take the common word from a statement of principles,
okay,
to action. So in dialogues, in classrooms, in mosques, in churches, in every place that we engage in, we have to create proper engagement on that.
I can tell you, there are probably a number of congregations never heard of this. How does, is there a mechanism that you have in place that gets this common word out? And it takes money, I'm sure.
Sure. I think it's the majority, actually, that have never heard of it, which is sad, but it's beginning to disseminate. On the one hand, dialogue is a means, not an ends.
Okay.
On the other hand, dialogue is an ends because we have to live out the very best of our faith. We have to know our own faith at its richest, deepest, best, and then enough about our neighbors, not just to tolerate it, but respect it. So learn to do that in your own community with the local synagogue, the local mosque, the local church first.
So the initiative has some guidelines that help communities engage in this discourse? We're not at that level?
We're not at that level.
Not that I'm aware of. I think the more important part of it was to really have a meeting of the minds at the highest level of religious representatives.
Okay, I think
if you look at it in terms of a response to the Pope's Regensburg speech, and because in his capacity as Pope, he speaks for, you know, millions, hundreds of millions of Catholics all over the world. And I think this was an attempt to create some kind of a parity between Muslim theological leaders across the spectrum, where you don't have a church in Islam, and Christian religious leaders, at least to move away from the discourse defined by polarization between religious leaders.
I think, because see, I'm closer to the grass tops. I think I hear what he's saying, and that is that if I were at Church A, I was a Catholic in Cathedral B, I was in Mosque C, and we got together at the local level, some people would say, what gives you the authority to have that discourse, saying that the differences between us are not significant? And you really do need that higher level discourse to say, this is the theological framework, the thread that holds us together in an authentic way.
Right. For Catholics, the charter for this would be the declaration of the Second Vatican Council called Nostra Aetate in Latin, which means in our age, which implies our age is different from earlier ages. It's the declaration on the relation of the Catholic Church to other religions. And in it, the Catholic Church publicly expresses its respect for Muslims.
I'm going to stop you for a minute, because I read, and I want you to clarify this, that it is Ratzinger who is one of the people who helps in the architecture of Nostra Aetate. Is that true?
I doubt that he had a major role. He was a young theologian.
Right, but he was on the scene.
There. He would have. No,
it was John Paul II who.
Carol Wojtyla was helped write some of it.
The key person who directed it was Cardinal Bea. He was a German Jesuit. It was actually a Jewish historian who approached Pope John the 23rd after the council had been announced, asking the Pope to have the Catholic Church correct its unjust teaching about the Jewish people. And the Pope took that to heart, asked Cardinal Bea, a German Jesuit scripture scholar, and he began working on a document, and in the course of the council, this was broadened to include other religions.
Amazing.
And so there's a section on Islam. It's the first time there's a formal public statement by the Catholic Church praising Muslim values like prayer, fasting, almsgiving, noting that Muslims honor Abraham, our common father in faith, noting that Muslims honor Jesus and Mary as the mother of Jesus. And the Council calls upon Catholics and Muslims to forget the past history of animosity and to look at the values we share in common and to work to shape a stronger, better world.
So on the foundation of Nostra Aetate, we now have
Correct.
Common Word?
Common Word.
Correct. Yes, in this country, I've been involved in both the Midwest Dialogue of Muslims and Catholics, then later in the Mid-Atlantic Dialogue. And I was in the Midwest Dialogue when 9/11 happened. We already had relationships beforehand, and we met at the headquarters of the Islamic Society of North America in October 2001 in a previously planned meeting. And the Muslims talked about the overwhelming support they had received from Catholics in dialogue with them.
Amazing.
Which was different from the Oklahoma City bombing, when one of the leading Muslims had been there and Muslims were falsely suspected of being involved. And at that point, at least the Muslims in this dialogue had no support from partners at all. But the one leader pointed to a basket of handwritten prayer cards from Catholic school children, asking to be peace partners with the members of the Islamic Society of North America. And one of the Muslim leaders pointed to the basket and said, "These are our most precious possessions."
Amazing. This is a common word between us and you. And this is a convenient time for us to close this part of our meeting. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to hold it right here.